A record-setting coach rounds out Jerome Tang's coaching staff with hopes to drastically improve the offense of this brand new roster.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. We have a loaded show for you today on the men's basketball side. We're going to dive into a new coaching addition who is an absolute stud and should hopefully excel on the offensive side for Kansas State heading into the new year, especially with this new roster. Speaking of that new roster, we have two new commits to officially talk about. And then what's next? Because there's some rumblings about potentially a big add to round out this roster, as well as some international talk. And then Tyreek Smith, what's going on with him? Is that waiver ever going to get approved? We're going to round up and talk about all of that on this episode today. But before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Matt Driscoll of North Florida will join the coaching staff of Jerome Tang at Kansas State after being the head coach of North Florida, part of the Atlantic Sun Conference for a long time. Was with Coach Tang at Clemson for a good amount of time. Excuse me, not Clemson, Baylor. I don't know why I said Clemson. I must have been looking at a picture. My apologies. With Baylor, and after 16 years with the Ospreys, on Thursday he accepted a job to become the associate head coach, and I think it will be the lead associate head coach, if you want to put it to the official terms, at Kansas State. Now, Driscoll's 60 years old. This comes as maybe a little bit of a surprise, but also I guess the writing on the wall kind of came into play as well once his son came over and also became part of the coaching staff, which happened just a few weeks ago as well. So I like this pickup. I think this is a really good addition to the coaching staff. And when you look at what Coach Tang has done with his coaching staff, and I think a lot of people were asking for some big changes. And I think some came by no choice, with Aldrich Malgi moving on, going to Texas after 3 seasons with the Wildcats. He had to make some changes, and this is going to be Ulrich's technically replacement, with Driscoll coming in to that position. Could it be seen as an upgrade? Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully we do see that. It's a coach with multiple years, and we're talking 16 years of head coaching experience in Division I basketball. Yes, it's the mid-majors. Yes, it's the A-Sun, but basketball's basketball, folks. And when you get to have that type of coaching prowess, that is a head coach, then come to your program as an associate head coach, or just an associate coach, if you will, that's a big thing. And as we mentioned, Chase Driscoll joined the staff as the director of video and analytics. And then they also brought in Bill Peterson earlier this season as well. And that will most likely round out the staff for Jerome Tang for this next season. And that gives Jerome Tang 5 assistant head coaches. I keep saying head coaches, whatever the case you want to be. 5 assistant coaches, with Driscoll being the 5th one in the group. You got Dream Dowling, Rodney Perry, Marco Bourne, and Anthony Winchester rounding out that group. I like it, but really to dive into Driscoll. And this is, to me, I think a really big addition. And I think this might have been that nice splash you needed, at least for the coaching staff, at least to change up the mentality of this coaching staff heading into the new year. Because the last couple seasons didn't work. And now you're bringing in somebody who does have a relationship with Jerome Tang. They worked together they worked together on the Baylor staff from 2003 to 2009 under Scott Drew. So it's not just a few years. They were together for quite some time. They understand each other. They were with each other until Driscoll went off to North Florida. And this is a guy that wasn't just the head coach of North Florida. Like, he did very well there. He is the most winningest coach in North Florida program history, as well as the most winningest coach in the A-Sun Conference history. So a lot of really good things coming up to the Kansas State levels. And you can call it what you want to see it. The fact that he's 60 years old, joining his son could be one of the aspects he joins, or the fact that he was with the A-Sun, a conference that if you win the conference, you're most likely the 15 or 16 seed in the tournament. Like, that's your absolute ceiling. You're trying to maybe make the next step forward. This could be a launch pad for him, where he potentially could find himself in a Power 4 job in the future. Or might just be a nice spot for him to finish off his career. He's 60 years old, so it can go either way. Usually you see basketball coaches go a little longer than most when it comes to the age. But we saw some quotes here from Coach Tang. Said, "I'm excited to welcome Matthew Driscoll to the K-State family as our new associate head coach." He also said, "Coach Driscoll is a proven program builder, an exceptional teacher of the game. His ability to develop players and implement high-level offensive systems is second to none." That's my favorite part there. Implement high-level offensive systems. Why is it my favorite part? Well, last year at North Florida, he averaged 82 points per game. If they can find a way to translate that to Kansas State this next season, we will not have a losing record at the very minimum. Also, with this new roster comes a lot of most likely three-point shooting. Well, at North Florida, his team averaged 13 three-point attempts per game. Pretty decent. I think you still are going to probably raise that bar even more. But those are the two stats that I looked at right away from North Florida's team statistics. Words are hard this morning. Getting back into their stats from last year. So 82 points per game is huge. 13 three-point assists. Three-point attempts are big. Let's see what happens when you're talking about Bashir, when you're talking about Marcus Johnson. You're talking about guys who are not afraid to throw the three ball. Can you get up to those 82 points, something that you didn't get to do much last year? You wound up averaging more close to 70 points per game just a season ago with a losing record, might I remind you. So Matt Driscoll, new assistant head coach, really liked this pickup, really do. And Driscoll's had a couple of words to say when he was picked up, and he said, "I know some will wonder why I would leave being a head coach to become an assistant coach, but this was a no-brainer in every aspect for us," speaking of his family. "We all know that work brings profit, and if you have studied Coach Tang and his program, that's what they do. My responsibility will be to continue to nurture, encourage, and expound upon this foundation." So speaks really highly of Coach Tang. I wouldn't expect anything else when you're coming over to a new coaching staff. And hopefully, he's got the resume to prove that he can make a next step forward. Hopefully they give him the reins to do so offensively, because it seems like he has what it takes to make that happen. And we'll see what happens moving forward. Now, I know I said Clemson. It says in the article that Driscoll was also a head coach at the high school level at La Roche, Division III schools in Pennsylvania, as long as an assistant at Slippery Rock, Wyoming, Clemson, and Valpo. That's why I said Clemson earlier in the episode. It was right on my screen. So there you go. That's what is going on with the head coaching staff at Kansas State. I personally love it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment description below, because I really want to know your thoughts. Is it enough for you to get excited about this roster? I'm still underwhelmed by this roster, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I think we're at the moment now where we have to start either getting excited about this or having some kind of optimistic views, because this is the roster they built, right? So now we have to understand, okay, this is what we have. We need to make sure that we can work with it. And I think Driscoll does just that. He is well aware of working with players at a mid-major level, and you're bringing in multiple players who were very talented at a mid-major level last year. He knows how to make them work offensively. Now, let's see if he can do that at the Power 4 level. That will be the biggest question we have most likely now heading into the offseason for the rest of the way. And we'll talk about that more as days and weeks move on. But let's talk more about this Kansas State roster. As I said, it is an absolutely loaded show today. Absolutely loaded show. I didn't even have the right graphic up. That's how loaded it was today. I was so excited. But let's talk about some new additions to the Kansas State roster. Marcus Johnson officially commits, as well as a new big man on campus. Yeah, let's talk about that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. No, folks. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, and stop managing your money and start building wealth. I mean, this has absolutely helped me. I am meal prepping a lot more now. I am cooking at home because with Monarch Money, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery and really just takeout, period. And now I budget smarter, save more, and honestly, I think I eat better too. I think I cook a lot better in some of those takeout restaurants. So take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button, rate 5 stars if you're listening on your favorite podcast form, or leave a review. Love if you could leave a review of what you think about this show, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Does a fantastic thing for me on the algorithm and helps us grow as we are working to start. We're starting to chase some of these Big 12 schools that have had a podcast for a lot longer than we have when it comes to the subscribers. And it's all because of you guys, my everydayers, listening to Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. We just talked about Matt Driscoll being the new assistant head coach for Kansas State. I think it's a great addition. This is probably the most optimistic I've felt about this team since, for a long time, since the Iowa State game. That's probably what I feel right now after this addition. I really do like this hire. I think it's a really good hire, and I think based on the roster that is just placed before us right now, if somebody's going to be able to adjust this roster offensively, well, he's got the resume to do so. So I'm hoping that it translates well at the Big 12 level. Speaking of additions to the roster, we talked about Marcus Johnson in the past, about him having a scheduled visit. He officially commits. So Marcus Johnson will officially be a Kansas State Wildcat this coming season. And hey, look, I like it. Is he going to be a guy who moves the needle? Maybe, potentially not. Maybe not a game changer, if you will. But he's a big guy. He's an interesting player. He's a guy that's going to play on the wing. He can shoot the ball. He's not afraid to shoot. And he's got a lot of versatility as well. I mean, we're talking about a 265-pounder, 6'7" guy who attempted almost 200 three-pointers last year. That doesn't really sound like something you would normally say when you're talking about a college basketball player. So 40% of almost 40% of his three-pointers went in as well. So it's not like the ones that he's throwing up there. One, he's not afraid to let it fly, and he's connecting on a decent amount. 40%, I'll take that. I'll take 40% from a guy who most likely is going to come off the bench, be a solid wing for you, probably get some really serious minutes when needed, especially if his shooting is hot. And the fact that he is that type of player, right, where we're talking about, big man on campus, if you will. We're already seeing some things on social media about, fans already loving him. And I think that might be a case. I could see him being a fan favorite just because of, how he plays and, the size on the court. I could totally see him being a fan favorite. Now, is the size a problem? And that's something that we have talked about in the past, and it was almost like the elephant in the room heading into the scheduled visit. I personally don't think so. He played 31 minutes per game, but conditioning could be a concern if you're trying to improve his defense. His defense wasn't great last year for Bowling Green. That's something that Jerome Tang has been known to do, to be very good on the defensive side. He's brought in a lot of players in the portal this year that have huge question marks on the defensive side. Let's see if Marcus Johnson can be another one of those projects that turn into a great defender, or at least a good enough defender to not be a reliability, an issue on the court when he's out there. Make sure that his offensive shots, his 40% from three is worth keeping him on there and not being a guy that just gets breezed by on the defensive side. So there you have Marcus Johnson joining the squad. Hey, look, it's finally starting to come together. I was asking for this to happen before the June 1st deadline that we kind of put on ourselves, and it looks like we're starting to get there. So there's some wins there. We also added another big man in Stephen Osei or Osai. I'm not sure if it's Osei or Osai, but he is going to join Kansas State as well. It sounds like he's going to redshirt this next season, though. So a couple of things right off the bat. One, interesting. Maybe we don't go to just 13 on the scholarship. Maybe we go to more than that. That could be an interesting move by Gene Taylor and Jerome Tang if they decide to move past the 13 threshold as we all expected to be. This is someone who it looks like is recovering from an injury. At Casper College last year, recorded 11 points and 7 rebounds per game in the junior college circuit. And this is someone who has playing experience with Bashir, and not Bashir, the guy that we picked up in the transfer portal. Actually, his brother, Abdul Bashir, who just committed to Auburn, and he played with him this past season. So he played with players who are now going to be playing in the SEC. So he has some, it looks like, some experience with players who are good enough at this level. And we're going to see if he can perform, looks like, this next season in 2026/27, I guess, because he will not be playing this next year. And it's okay. It's just, to me, when I saw the news, it was just surprising because you are looking for that next big splash, right? This news came out when we didn't hear about Marcus Johnson yet, when we didn't hear about the news that we're going to talk about in the next segment. And it kind of just came out of the blue that we're adding a player, but by the way, he's not going to help us this coming season. He's not going to help us make it to the dance for the first time in 3 years. And we're going to have to wait till next year. And if you're recovering from an injury, that's fine. I understand it. It just wasn't what we were looking for at the moment. So now that we've had some time to think about it and look into it, I'm excited for him. Hopefully he can get some good practice in and not be out all season, at least in practice, because of his injury. Hopefully he can recover well and play with the team on the practice court, get better, learn the systems, learn with the coaching staff, get a good relationship with the coaching staff so he doesn't bounce back out in the portal next year and find himself somewhere else, and he can actually be a good asset moving forward. Something that you don't really have this year, right? You're only bringing back 3 scholarship players this season. So you're already kind of putting yourself in a good position 2 years down the road, hopefully bringing back at least 1 returning player, assuming they have to blow it up again, which I hope that's not the case because I'm so sick of it. I want that retention model. Maybe this is the step forward. Maybe this is exactly what we're looking for the retention model. You bring in a couple players that are not working well in the portal. They're not getting a lot of traffic. They're not getting a lot of attention in the transfer portal. This one could have been because of injury, if you will. And you kind of make a commitment to them in hopes that they make a commitment back to you. You build a strong relationship during the year where they're building back up, recovering, and then you have them. And then you can prove that in your transfer portal, in your recruiting, and hopefully that can develop and build a huge relationship. Because as of right now, we are in, going into year 4 here, and it doesn't sound like we have those relationships built. And that's not good. Not when you're at year 4. If you're at year 2, I think you can say, it'll come. But I think we're at this point where we're starting to wave that yellow flag and say this needs to happen now or it's not going to happen at all. So hopefully something like this with Stephen Osei is the nice step forward where you're starting to build those type of relationships with players and also build for your future of the Kansas State roster. Speaking of the future of the Kansas State roster, we still have a couple more roster spots to fill, and there is a huge name that is being linked to Kansas State. Is it the name that we need for that big, huge splash for Jerome Tang? We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao. The PJ Haggerty chase. That seems to be the new one now for Kansas State. And he was rumored to land with Kansas State earlier in the season, right before he entered the transfer portal. And now it seems like they are in the front running, if you will. It is between Kansas State and NC State right now. So he hasn't exited the NBA draft. He has declared for the NBA draft. He hasn't exited it yet, but it sounds like he will. It sounds like he is not going to go ahead with the entire NBA draft process. He's going to head back to college. And if that happens, looks like Kansas State is in the big running. And it would be a big addition to me. Now, I will be completely honest with you. This throws up, this makes me a little nervous. And I think it should if you're a Kansas State fan, because we're talking about a player who decides to pop back in late in the transfer portal after the NBA process. You're going to be, you're looking for some holes to fill on your roster. You're probably going to have to do an overpay, if you will. Sounds a lot like what happened last year with Coleman Hawkins. And although not to his fault, it didn't really work out. That roster didn't really work out overall. It was an underperforming roster. And when I look at this roster this year, I don't see as much talent as I do, even with the addition of Hagerty this season that I did last year. So am I a little bit nervous? Yes, but it's not my money. So there you have it. I just get to explain and talk about it. I would love to have PJ Haggerty on the roster. I think this would absolutely fill the void that you're looking for in that backcourt. And then if you put him across guys like Bashir, who great three-point shooter, as we mentioned, Nate Johnson, the MAC player of the year. This is a team who can, with Matt Driscoll as your hopefully offensive mastermind, this is a team that you hopefully can turn into a winning squad and hopefully find yourself on the bubble. I think that's where you're at if you bring in PJ Haggerty. You don't have these Elite 8, Sweet 16 aspirations like you did last year going into the season. You can't have those. Not after 2 years of the dance. Or missing the dance, excuse me. You can't. You can't have that. And I think this roster is a little bit less talented. I really do, with a lot to prove. Maybe the potential ceiling is a lot higher. Maybe that's what I'm missing. Maybe that's what the coaching staff sees. Maybe they see this as their potential to begin the Houston model, if you will, begin the retention model. They're not bringing in many players with 1-year eligibility. So you bring in some of these younger guys that can work and build throughout Kansas State. Maybe it's a down year this year. Maybe, possibly. But maybe a down year means you still battle on the bubble because you have some guys who have absolute grit throughout the entire season. I'll take that. I will take that compared to last year, where it felt like there was so many games where we just quit. That's what it felt like. And then you just were not waiting. It was just a negative feeling getting to the press conference, things like that. But if you can go to a game or watch a game, and you can, even if we lose by 5 or 10, but you can tell this team has got grit, and you can see it. And you say, they're close. And almost like what Jerome Tang said last year with the tinkering, but actually mean it this time. We're like, this team is so close. This team has it. This team has what it takes. And if they can find a way to do it, buy in early, find a culture, something that they didn't have last year, this team could be a bubble team. If you bring in a guy like PJ Haggerty. I mean, he's a player that has NBA aspirations, just like Coleman Hawkins did. This is a guy who really could do some great things. He was the number one point guard in the transfer. He's the number one point guard in the transfer rankings according to 24/7. He was a great prospect as well, according to 24/7. This is a guy that can help elevate your program, and it's a big name on campus as well. So we'll see what happens with PJ Haggerty. I'm hoping we get some news potentially over the weekend. Maybe a Friday news dump. Maybe as soon as I post this, we'll go on Twitter X and there'll be a commitment, and then this video will be completely obsolete and I'll have to record a new one. I'd be okay with that if that meant PJ Haggerty came to the Wildcats. We're still waiting on some other news as well. Elias Rapique is a name that continues to be swirled around about adding to the roster as a second international player. I'm starting to hear from some of the message boards as well that it's a done deal, that Rapique is on the roster. He's going to be coming. He's signed and done everything to apply and join school and get into classes. There just hasn't been an announcement yet. Now, there's some rumblings potentially about the reason why he hasn't made an announcement yet, because he might still be under contract with his professional team over across the seas, or it just might be one of those signings or recruitments that you just don't hear anything about, and he just shows up when it's time to go. Either way, it sounds like we're going to get Elias Rapique to the roster. So it sounds like this roster is starting to grow together. With PJ Haggerty, if he joins the roster, I think I'll start feeling a lot better about it as well. I think. Not after Matt Driscoll's there, because I really like that pickup. And I'll go back to it again. With Marcus Johnson, Nate Johnson, Bashir, these are all mid-major guys who had great success at the mid-major level in their collegiate career. You're bringing in a head coach at the mid-major level that did it better than a lot of coaches at that level. Again, the most winningest coach in ASUN conference history. And now he's going to be your assistant coach and most likely lead the offensive charge. At least that's what it sounds like from Tang's comments welcoming him in into the staff. I love that. And then PJ Haggerty, hopefully, could be addition. It could complete Doug McDaniel trade, right? To Memphis. PJ Haggerty was with Memphis. Doug McDaniel went to Memphis. And speaking of Memphis, Tyreek Smith, who also joined Kansas State this season in the transfer portal very early during the season, if you will, committed to the Wildcats, waiting on a waiver and still waiting on a waiver in late May. As of right now, I do not know if he will play for the Wildcats. I don't. But I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not feeling good about it. Not feeling good about it at all. If we're waiting this long for a waiver, still not hearing any news, it could be where we don't have Tyreek Smith going into the next season. That's one more position that you have to fill late in the transfer portal. So hopefully they get some news in the next week or so moving forward before they get to this June window, if you will. And this is just a window that we've kind of built in ourselves. And I think they also do as well, because this isn't something that I just came up with. It's a rumblings that I've heard in reports and, talking with other people, that they try to build these rosters by June 1st. So that's where people start to report all that good things like that. And they want to make sure that they're ready to go. So that'll do it for today's episode of Locked On Kansas State. And I thank you for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has latest rumors, portal entries, signings. So be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. What a loaded show of college basketball. When we come back, we're going to probably drop some episodes this weekend. We got some stuff to still talk about. I got some loose notes that I want to put together. Women's basketball, we got to cover some there. We had a new commitment over on that side. We're starting to get some recruits coming in for the 2026 class on the football side. We got to talk about those. We're going to do some recruiting over on this show. And then the summer school program will still continue for the Big 12 football teams. And of course, we got to continue on with what's going on with these 16-team playoffs, college football commissions. There's just a lot of stuff to cover. And we're going to make sure we have you covered. We're going to probably drop a couple this weekend. So if you're listening, if you're doing some driving around on this Memorial Day weekend, be sure to check out your podcast feed for Locked On Kansas State, because we'll have you covered for your drive around. Stay safe this holiday season. And if I don't hear you back until Monday or Tuesday, please be safe. Don't drink and drive. And we'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.